Thank you for joining us for the Innovating for Sustainability in the Sports Industry. This is part of Harvard Climate Action Week this week, and my name is Lynn Schenk. I'm the Director of the Business and Environment Initiative here at Harvard Business School. The role of the BEI here at the school is to really be the connection point on all things climate and environment in connection with students, faculty, alumni, staff, and even across other Harvard schools. And so we're here to really ensure that the school continuously pushes the envelope, brings people together, and innovates around the intersection of business and climate change. So it's a very exciting place to be, and it's an exciting time for all of us here at Harvard, and particularly at the business school, as we continue to really think about all of the different intersection points between business and climate change and continue to try to improve the situation we face in climate and use business as a force for good. It's exciting to have this panel today and to have this discussion with two really exciting people as guests. And for me, the sports industry is an extremely exciting area because it's actually a really fun way to think about climate. I don't know what events you all have joined or how you all engage in climate in your daily lives, but some of it can be kind of depressing and feel like, can't we start talking about the opportunity? And the reality is that it feels that there is no bigger opportunity, forget AI for a moment, no bigger real opportunity than what we're seeing in the sports industry. And it's in some ways a not clean slate, and there's things that need to be done differently, but there's a lot of fresh places to start, and we're going to talk about both sides of that today. So I will introduce the two amazing people that have come to speak with us today. First, on the far end, I have Professor Rosabeth Moss-Kanter. She's an HBS professor who holds the Ernest L. Arbuckle Professorship at HBS. She specializes in strategy, innovation, and leadership for change. And she also co-founded the Harvard University-wide Advanced Leadership Initiative, which became a growing international model for a new stage of higher education, preparing successful top leaders to apply their skills to national and global challenges. She's the author or co-author of 20 books. Her latest book is Think Outside the Building: How Advanced Leaders Can Change the World One Smart Innovation at a Time. And she's the former chief editor of Harvard Business Review. And Professor Kanter has repeatedly been named to lists such as the 50 most powerful women in the world, Times of London, and the 50 most influential business thinkers in the world. She's received 24 honorary doctoral degrees, as well as numerous leadership awards, lifetime achievement awards, and prizes. She is also a faculty affiliate for the Business and Environment Initiative and puts an incredible amount of energy continuously into new cases and new ways at looking at not only the climate challenge, but so many challenges related to innovation and situations facing us. So we are truly, truly lucky to have Professor Kanter here with us today.
Thank you, Lynn.
And next to Professor Kanter is Maria McClay. She is class of 2006.
2006.
From HBS. And she is someone I was very lucky to get to know a few years ago. And she's currently the founder and CEO of Nine Commons, which is an elevated fashion-forward fanwear label dedicated exclusively to women's sports. She's a lifelong fashion lover, and she brings over 20 years of global experience spanning operations, strategy, and investing, with a career shaped by influential roles at Gucci, Google, and McKinsey, each chapter driven by her passion for uncovering what's next and building the teams to bring that to life. At Gucci, she began her journey on the shop floor and rose to oversee operations across 9 countries. Intrigued by the power of technology to transform fashion, she later joined Google, where she led the fashion and beauty cloud and digital marketing teams across the US and UK. And there she spearheaded initiatives in AI-driven personalization, sustainable supply chains, and retail innovation, including Google's fashion moonshot in partnership with Stella McCartney, helping brands make more responsible sourcing decisions, which comes into the work that she's doing today as well. Maria is deeply committed to shaping the future of the fashion industry and actively mentoring and advising next-gen entrepreneurs through platforms like the Harvard Rock Center here at HBS and the New York Fashion Tech Lab. She's also a lifelong sports enthusiast, like all of us, both on the field and in the stands, and she's inspired by athletes who defy the odds, and she's very inspired by the growing movement around women's sports. So Maria believes in the beauty of possibility and in the power of business to do good while doing well. And her energy will be infectious as we go through this discussion today.
That's very high standard.
Yes, I'm just predicting that it will be. So thank you for being here with us today as well. So the way that we'll do this discussion is we will, each participant will give about 10-ish minutes, 15 minutes of remarks, however long they'd like, to talk about their area of specialization and where they've written cases or built a business around different aspects of sustainability and innovation in the sports industry. And then we'll do a little Q&A and dialogue amongst ourselves for you all, and then we'll open up to audience questions, pulling first from all of you so kindly here in the room. So without further ado, Professor Cantor, we'd love to hear from you. You've just written a really exciting case about a new arena or a renovated arena in Seattle, and you've seen all the ways in which the sports industry is really many intersection points for innovation and for climate advancement. So I'll pass it over to you. Please go.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you. And thank you for mentioning fun. So I think we'll have fun tonight, but also I think fun is one of the many reasons why sports should be considered at the core of many sustainability strategies for places. Because it's fun. It takes an issue that is sometimes grim to people, and it can translate it into something that unites a community that wants to cheer on their team. I've been working, well, first of all, one question is, does sustainability help a team win? And the answer is not really. So I will talk about the Seattle arena. The teams that play there, one is a women's NBA, Women's National Basketball Association team, the Seattle Storm, that does tend to win. And Seattle just named a street in Seattle after Sue Bird. But the other team is a hockey team, and it's way down at the bottom of the league, even though they sell out all the time. So one thing I learned from having done a book on winning and losing streaks in sports years ago called Confidence, is that you can do very well as a business and not win because people still want to come and see you play. So sports unites communities well beyond political divides. Sports can be a showcase and a model. Sports is multifunctional, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Sports is all involved with celebrities, and celebrities can champion the cause. So the players, the performers, there are some performers who play in arenas and stadiums that have live entertainment as well as live sports. And many young performers now have sustainability clauses in their contracts because it's so important to them. So this is, however, all about buildings. I started my case on Seattle's Climate Pledge Arena, and I just want to show you a picture of the outside of the arena. You can see the big sign that says the Climate Pledge. Think about that for a moment. A major sports facility named the Climate Pledge, and there it is on the building. There's a big sign. And if you look at the building in context, you can now see that it's a low building. That's because it preserved the historic roof and tunneled underneath to build the arena. So it's also an incredible feat of engineering to do this. And it's sitting in a historic part of Seattle, right by the Space Needle, which was iconic in Seattle. So this is a huge gathering place. You can also see all the trees around it. It's surrounded by parkland, in part because the tunneling underneath permitted trucks to go under the building and are barely out on the street. And so it's very pedestrian friendly and a lovely place to be. And just one more picture, Climate Pledge Arena inside has a living wall. And that's part of the climate education that the facility does, not in a heavy-handed way, but in a way that educates the public because they enjoy it so much. And that's an iconic place for people to take pictures, especially tourists from out of town, the living wall. Well, this is an incredible story, how they got it to happen. So first of all, the building itself, it's just about the greenest sports facility in the world. It attempts to be not just carbon neutral, but zero carbon. Partly the preservation of the historic roof, which you could see in one of the earlier pictures, helps the building itself with being low carbon. So preservation can be a very important part of creating green cities. In the construction process, in order to lower the profile of the arena and also quadruple its size, there was a lot of engineering innovation, including holding up a 44 million pound roof while they were tunneling underneath and building the facility. And with safety paramount, did it during COVID. So an incredible accomplishment in and of itself. In terms of the operation of the building, everything had to be green. This in part was because of the sale of the naming rights. I mean, it is astonishing to have an arena called Climate Pledge. It's like iconic. That comes from Jeff Bezos of Amazon. Amazon bought the naming rights, and Bezos, who has been active in climate issues, even though Amazon itself hasn't always met its goals, but Bezos has this as a major area of philanthropy. And he insisted, after he got the proposal for this arena, the arena was being built because the city gave them the bid before it was named. He insisted that it be zero carbon. And the building had already started to install gas lines, natural gas lines. And they had to take it all out and start again with electrifying everything. So everything is electric. That had a lot of consequences. One is that one thing these buildings do, besides gathering people, is feed people and give people merchandise and other amenities. Well, chefs don't like cooking with electricity. However, they've learned to love it because that's all part of what the Climate Pledge insisted that they do. The laundry. There was a question about whether the uniforms would dry fast enough in an electric dryer. So they had to do a lot of innovation and a lot of convincing of people who would be involved in arena operations, but they did it. And then for ice hockey, for the basketball part, of course, it's a regular floor. For ice hockey, you need ice. And so the Zambonis that come out and ice the arena floor, there had never been an electric Zamboni before that. Now this technology exists for other arenas. So just for basic operations of the building, and then for all the concessions, food and beverage, they worked with vendors who made products specifically for the arena and now have those products that they could use elsewhere, including changing patterns to avoid the use of plastic, single-use plastic. Waste management, it's totally clean because it wants to have zero waste. And they've invented processes by which the people who collect the things people leave at their seats, sort them on the spot so that they can be immediately composted or put in recycling bins and eliminated. So there's so much about the operation of the arena. When it came time to do the finishing touches, used natural materials from the region. So this is Seattle, there's beautiful wood and no stinting on what it costs. So the cost overruns were enormous. And this is where having deep-pocketed investors really matter. So all of this is going on, but the reason sports is important is not just because what people do there, but they have to get there. And so transportation is a really important part of the life of a stadium or an arena. And so for Climate Pledge Arena, it was important to try to reduce the carbon footprint of the audiences. And so everybody gets free public transportation in their ticket. And they have reduced the number of parking spaces. You have to sign up for parking in advance. But on the spot, you can take public transportation that the arena helped invest in improving. So it's not only the audience that has to get there, it's the performers. And one of the things that makes sports kind of unsustainable is the whole entourage comes with teams and with performers. And because of the tunneling underneath, those entourages barely appear, and they can use as many electric vehicles as possible. Because of this, they were able to open with Coldplay as the opening entertainment act. Coldplay just doesn't play live venues, but they did this one because it aligned with their values. Billie Eilish writes sustainability into her contracts and has inspired people to do the same. So transportation is very important to the arena. The question of impact, well, they have gotten zero carbon certification. The former CEO started an alliance of other sports teams and stadiums and arenas, which include the group that owns the Boston Red Sox, Fenway Sports Group. He started an alliance so that they swap ideas, can compare their metrics, and they all have committed to measuring their climate impact. But in terms of the impact on, say, the fans, people love it and like it because the education is not so overt that they feel guilty and that they go to have a good time. And so that's very important to the audiences. The stadium, the arena tends to be packed, tends to be sold out. It's also, however, as I said, doesn't necessarily impact who wins the game. That's still a matter of the players and team dynamics. But along with the sustainability ethos, there's a team spirit ethos in the arena itself, very conscious of workers and their lives and making sure they're paid well, treated well, and it's a culture that also unites people. So this project is kind of a model project. And you were asking me earlier about the new stadium plan for Washington, D.C. It's going to have a lot of these features, a lot of trees, a lot of natural environment, a lot of high sustainability features.
Excellent. And I have about 30 things I want to dive into already with what you said. I want to transition to Maria, but then circle back because I think a lot of what Maria's focused on builds on a lot of these concepts of opportunity and really sees, I mean, everything you just mentioned, Professor Cantor, every single piece from the waste to how people get there, to how people feel when they're there, into the fan experience, as well as the experience that the athletes have, and all of the varying motivations, is something that you've jumped squarely into in developing your new business. And Marie and I met 5 years ago or so when you were still at Google, and already just very energized by everything that you were doing at the time with AI and the cloud and everything. But the passion that you've put behind when it's something like sports and the sports industry and the potential there, like I said earlier, has just been infectious. And so I just feel like you heard Professor Cantor, but I just want to say to you, go. We want to hear your story.
Okay.
We want to see, how you've taken a slice of this
And stop me if I
Yeah.
keep on going.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think, listen, I'm a fashion person through and through. I love fashion. I equally love sports. I think, as you mentioned, it is something that brings people together. It is fun. It is something that's inspiring. And I think what I'd love to share today is I agree with you. It doesn't make teams win, but I do think sustainability, more broadly defined, brings people into the sport, brings people into the community. And so what I'd love to share today with you all is kind of the dynamics of why I think sports more broadly is exploding, why I think it's ripe for opportunity, why particularly women's sports, I think, is setting a new blueprint, which I'm really excited to see take off. And what some of the areas are. Yes, there's stadiums, but there's also merch, an area that's near and dear to my heart, food and beverage, facilities. And so hopefully I'll be able to share a little bit with you all about that. Lynn, you mentioned the sports industry is big and it's large, but I think what's most interesting is the evolution it's had over the past decade or so. You used to have the super fans, people like my dad that used to watch the Eagles every single Sunday. And I think what's happened is that actually sports has become culture and culture has become sports. And so no longer do we have super fans. We have casual observers. We have people who dip in and out. And I think sports, particularly in this moment, I mean, athletes, yes, they're celebrities. They have a massive platform because of what has happened in terms of digitalization. And I think they have become, and this might be a bit dramatic, but I believe this, I think for many of us, at least for myself and my family, they become storytellers. They become modern heroes. How can you not connect with their stories of resilience and triumph and being the underdog? When you think about Taylor Tanstead, who came out at the US Open and the reaction that the crowds had for her, or Steph Curry, who was kind of overlooked during all of his college career and didn't get recruited, and then he becomes a two-time MVP and three-point champion. Those are the stories that are connecting people today. Now, why is this important? Well, you do have certain leagues that have been around a long time that are looking for new growth of audiences. And so they're like, how do I shake this up? That's prime for innovation. You have new platforms that give access to women's sports that you weren't able to see before. That shakes things up, totally new people that you're speaking to. And so these new media deals and platforms have given rise over the past 3 years to entirely new leagues, like the Professional Women's Hockey League, like volleyball, the first professional volleyball league, full stop. Athletes Unlimited, Unrivaled, which is the 3-on-3 basketball tournament that was created in Miami to give women who previously had to play internationally to make money, it gave them a home where they were paid more. Now, why do I mention this? I mention this because I think that sports right now is at a massive disruption. I agree it's not generative AI, but let me tell you, I think it is the great next story, one of the biggest disruptors. And if you look at the returns from a VC perspective, they're there. What we're seeing, I think, particularly within women's sports, is that capital is pouring in. So to your point, it costs a lot of money. You have Avenue Capital, you have Carlyle, you have entirely new funds like Monarch. You also have Sue Bird and other athletes that are starting to invest in women's sports as well. So you're starting to see all the cooks in the kitchen, new cooks seeing things from a different perspective. You have valuations that are going off the roof. So Angel FC is a football or soccer, depending upon which side of the Atlantic you live. A soccer team based in LA, women's soccer team. It was bought in 2020, an expansion fee as part of the NWSL. The figures are not public, but between 2 to 5 million, more or less. It was sold in 4 years for $250 million. Okay, so capital is pouring in. So you have all of the ingredients for change and innovation. Now, why is this exciting? And why is, I think, women's sports, which I want to talk about some of the innovation that you mentioned, why is it so exciting? Because women's sports didn't have the legacy infrastructure that other sports did. And so speaking last week with who I can't say who, but one of the individuals who kind of runs one of the big soccer teams, she said to me, Maria, this is the most exciting time. People came to us and said, why don't you just do it the way that it's been done? And we said, actually, why don't we just imagine of what could be done? And interestingly, community, environment, connection, and wellness are all things that are central to many of these things as they're growing. So what are we seeing? We talked about the facilities that are now being created that have a much more sustainable imprint. In women's sports, there's 9 training facilities that have been built over the past 2 years. They range from $70 million to $150 million. They're being built from scratch. They're being built with wellness centers, yoga and Pilates studios, courts that connect the community in where they can play. They have female-specific and athlete needs that are created initially right from scratch. And so you have, to give you an example, the Indiana Fever just last week broke ground on one of their facilities with 2 practice courts, a large strength and conditioning center, hydrotherapy, wellness features, a full kitchen, yoga and Pilates space, childcare, which is quite important as you think about wellness more holistically, spa-like amenities, and a media production studio. And facilities aren't just buildings. Innovation's happening in the details. So a lot of the stadiums that you mentioned, there's a really cool company called BrainLit, which is a health tech lighting company. They don't simply create lights that you turn off and turn on. What they do is they don't brighten a room, they regulate circadian rhythms using lighting by all of these PhD scientists that cook this up. Their systems improve sleep, it improves recovery and performance by syncing athletes' bodies to natural life cycles. This is a recent innovation that's come up. For community partnerships, another aspect, if you think about like sustainability, is that owners and investors are increasingly seeing community impact as fundamental to their identity and business operations. Angel FC, for every sponsorship dollar that they get from the very beginning, 10% goes back to the city of LA. Even the partners that they decided to partner with, DoorDash, for every goal that someone scores, they give 10,000 meals back to the underserved community in LA. The results have been astounding. Demand is out through the roof in terms of the number of people in the stadium. And there's been a lot of other players like Kansas City Current, who also reinvested 10%. Indiana Fever is renovating basketball courts all across Indiana. And their ambition is to cover every single basketball court across Indiana. And what we're seeing is that there's a return. There's a return in terms of fans, there's a return in terms of customers, and people truly care. The area that's near and dear to my heart, and then I will pause, is merchandise. So how many of you have bought merch? Like, I mean, I bought like Harvard merch, right? Hopefully all of you have bought Harvard merch. How many of you like love it? Like, okay, why do you love it?
It's a form of identity, community.
Community. Tell me more. What's your favorite merch?
So I basically have a jersey from everywhere I've ever been. Like I travel to stadiums, do all that kind of stuff, do that with my family. So yeah, no, and then go watch a game, you wear it, you meet folks you've never met before, you have a great time.
Connection, as my daughter says to me, this thing. Yes, this means I feel you, I feel you. Merch, I remember, I'm from Philadelphia. And so I remember when I was a little girl and I would have my little Philadelphia Phillies hat on. And to me, that was a sense of pride, a sense of connection. I was the underdog. It was 1993 and we were the miracle. We almost won the World Series. It represented a connection with others. And every time I saw someone pass down the street with that cap, I was like, one of us. My kids, all Celtics fans. So I had to convert for basketball just for them. But there is that sense of connection. Saying that, merch today is not great. We love it, but it's often made out of polyester, which is petroleum-based. You really want to put that on your skin. It's something that I learned from people that I've been working with my new career, called a logo stick. You take a sweatshirt or a hoodie or pants, and you just stick the logo on. Not very creative. And then there's tons of this stuff made. And once someone is traded to a new team, it gets destroyed. That person no longer, that jersey might not no longer resonate. And so where there's a lot of innovation, I think, potential is specifically in merch to make it more sustainable with natural fibers and materials, and what I'm focused on, make it better designed. And also specifically with women's sports, there is a mentality of pink it and shrink it. So taking men's products, sorry, it's like been overused a gazillion times, but it is called pink it and shrink it. But essentially just to, even if they offer stock, because a lot of times they don't, but essentially to make a smaller size of something that's been made for a man. The Sports Innovation Lab estimates that this is a $4 billion opportunity. So this is a business opportunity. And that's why I'm building Commons to make more responsibly made, elevated fan wear for women's sports, to do exactly what you said, to give visibility to athletes, to help with storytelling, and to connect people. And so that's on the apparel side. We've seen with hockey, the Professional Women's Hockey League launched with Barbie, little dolls, like Barbie dolls, that were their two most prominent athletes who are also Olympians. And it sold out immediately. And $5 from every doll that they sold went back to open up opportunities in education for girls to get also access to hockey. And so I think merch is one of the most untapped areas that can help with brand and identity, but it can also have a profound social impact. And so, yeah, I'll lead with that.
Excellent. So exciting. And really, as I thought about this, it's in some ways it's like, whoa, they're talking about two totally different things here, but really it's not. And I think there are a lot of connecting points, and it just shows the entire spectrum, the whole ecosystem, and the way to define sustainability and all the things that relate to sustainability, whether it's hard climate and something that merits, climate tech investing, or things that are really more impact focused and community building, but they're all related. And so one question that, being at the business school and that many of you have in mind is, gosh, this stuff costs a premium, right? People talk about the green premium and why bother. And, there's like the upfront costs are what people are focused on. And something I've experienced, my background is in finance as well, and something that, people really are short-term thinkers and don't know how to really monetize or quantify some of these more intangible values. But Professor Cantor, you said, this was all possible, this amazing first ever net zero, arena. It was all possible because of deep pockets, but someone is still spending the money expecting something back. And you mentioned also, Maria, that there's, that all of this investment made in the wellness aspects and in the whole person aspects for the female athlete facilities, that, at some point there is a cost benefit. And so starting with you, Professor Cantor, they had deep pockets, but lots of people have deep pockets and they spend it on other things. So how can that sort of ethos, or what was the mentality around the payback and something that can mobilize the Washington Commanders to really use that same playbook?
So we have to remember that the private sector is not the only sector. The public sector has a lot to say about all of this, and sports tends to represent the city, the community. It often has the name of the city on it, and that's really important. In the case of Seattle and the Climate Pledge Arena, there actually was no public money involved. And that was very important for selling it, because often the team owners want the public sector to cough up. But still, it's a public amenity. The land is owned by the city, and so it's considered a public-private partnership. And that's really important, so that profit to the team owners is not the only measure of success. There are benefits to cities. That's where I started, not even though I love sports and had written about teams in my book, Confidence. I started this effort with understanding how cities can become greener, how places can meet their climate goal, and was looking for instances of high impact. And that's where I discovered this as an iconic Seattle structure, but also part of a whole tradition in Seattle of green buildings. And the certification that this arena won was started in Seattle by Jason McLennan, a major sustainability consultant. And Seattle is one of the greenest cities in the United States. And so the context matters and the public sector matters. When the owners are asked why they were willing to make the additional investments, some of it was philanthropy, deep pockets. And so philanthropy, the nonprofit sector is also important in this. Jeff Bezos has a foundation and he has to give away money associated with his focus on climate action. And so that's an altruistic motivation, not a making money motivation. But then, and some of the owners said one of them said when he had to talk to the other investors about this, he asked if they had grandchildren. And he did start talking about the long-term legacy. So we need to remember that in every city, there has been a lot of private philanthropy that has contributed to public good. And so you have to think about this arena as public good. Now they sell out. I think they're doing very well in terms of profitability. They had, well, the number 32 has been retired on the Kraken team. That's because 32 is the freezing point for ice, but also because they then got 32,000 people to buy season tickets as they were starting out. So I think they've done, we had a lot of trouble getting numbers, but I think they do well financially. And people who have resources want to be part of a community of people who also have resources and get the privileges of the owner's suite and so forth. So there are a lot of motivations, but I think it probably is making money. I think they do very well. I think the teams and certainly the live entertainers do well because it's an attractive place to come to. But for the city, it stands for so much more than just another building. And for that reason alone, cities want to have things that demonstrate what's possible. And I think the showcase functions are very, very important. So I was looking for examples. Lynn knows some of my other cases, an electric school bus company. I was looking for examples that would be high impact and be motivating, that both brought long-term benefits, but also short, immediate returns. And those returns might be pleasure, those returns might be money, but there had to be something in it in the short term because we can't expect people to always have distant long-term in mind that they may never experience.
I think that's so important. I think the wide-ranging definition of returns and how do you actually capture all of the benefits of these projects, and it's so important to really double click on the role that philanthropy can play. And there's this this expectation that philanthropy should come in and just give money, and it doesn't ever stretch far enough. And there's so much potential in the creative interventions out there that philanthropy could do on the climate front. And I think this is a really good example because not only did they help defray some of the cost, but they also did that in a way that this can now be the example. It's that first time example.
And they themselves, well, if I can say one more thing, they themselves, for example, in the Seattle case, they have their own foundation and they're contributing to the community. I think you mentioned some of that also. And I found that I haven't done a survey of that city, but I've done some informal surveying of participants in programs at HBS from the city. And I think almost across the board, even people who are not sports lovers, even people who are advocates for social justice, still love this arena and love the centering of the arena and the practice facility, which gives to the community in a significant way. And they figured out how to weave in their own giving back to the development of what is selling tickets and getting a financial return.
And thank you. And Maria, what do you see, what's in it? I mean, there's a lot of money being spent on these different facilities, but also in your product under development, you are going out of the way on the sourcing side. You have, I think you said you have someone specifically focused on materials sourcing. So, and you're paying more for that. So there's, I mean, why? I mean, what's in it in the short run, long run?
For sure. And I would say, I agree with you that when you make major investments in facilities, you have to have super deep pockets. A lot of these leagues, it takes time and years and money to even turn a profit. I do think, though, that, and again, within the lane that I'm in, specifically within women's sports, I think a sense of identity and authenticity is really important. And I do think some of these investments pay off in terms of brand love of fans who continue to come back. And so again, looking at the data point of Angel FC, call it a couple million, 250 after four years. If you look at the Valkyries, they have the highest valuation of any team in the WNBA, and they're all about community impact and doing things what they call doing it right. And so I think within certain subsectors, they do value it, and they sniff out whether or not it is being implemented in a 360 way, and if they are actually taking actions that resonate from a community point of view, a sustainability point of view, et cetera. I also think, though, if you talk about the training facilities, I think it can be a real competitive advantage. And why do I think so? There's limited talent in terms of athletes. They're a little demanding. They're making choices about which team they're going to spend their time on. And so I think when you look at facilities, they're looking at, do I have the right coaches? Do I have the right teammates? Can I win? Are these facilities the one that I'm going to be the most successful? And so by innovating in that area, I do think, not just from a professional sports point of view, but also if you look at college and all the changes that have come into place because of NIL, so name, image, and likeness, where players are getting paid a ton of money. It used to be, or some players are getting paid a ton of money, not everyone, but it used to be all about facilities, and now it's about wellness, health, et cetera. And so that also is becoming a real differentiating factor between different universities. For me specifically, yes, would it be less complicated to make polyester merch that's cheap, that's unartful? Absolutely. Do I have a few more gray hairs because it's been a bit more complicated? Absolutely. I think if you have, okay, so will people make decisions based upon whether or not something is sustainable or not? I would hope and I would love to say yes. The reality is the product needs to be cool and differentiated and it needs to appeal. And if that is not met, then the rest of it, quite frankly, it's a bit more difficult to sell. Saying that, the reason I'm doing it is I believe deeply in it. I do believe enough consumers are willing to spend a little bit more money. I believe that companies like mine might be willing initially to sacrifice a little margin. And I think over time, people will fall in love with the brand and continue to have loyalty to that brand if they feel like they're doing the right thing. But first, they need to love the product. And so for me, it's a commitment because it means so much to me. And I do think consumers care, but it can't be the only thing. It needs to be a really superior, amazing quality product.
Excellent. Do you have questions for each other? Should I open up to the audience? Does anybody in the audience have any questions? Yes, go ahead.
I have one. Coming from innovation in green and sustainability, and I agree with you, sometimes it costs more, the innovation, of course. But do you think that sometimes there are some businesses that take advantage of being green, so make you pay more for something that, yes, of course, there are some costs, but maybe not that much? So maybe do you think that there is also a little bit of taking advantage of being green?
So your question is more, do you think that there are companies that are self-implementing the green premium because they can, because they know that there is a market for it?
I mean, it's pretty tough, I gotta tell you. I mean, I think, are there all kinds of businesses that might overcharge and undercharge? Absolutely, as there are in the world. I think consumers sniff out, like I could note a bit of cynicism, sniff out the ones that they think they're being taken advantage of. What I will say is that doing things the right way takes more time. It does cost more. I think it's worth it. And so, to your point, you could for sure find a company that's like that. But what I also tell you, from my experience, it also takes a heck of a lot of work to at least try to do things the right way, and you know you're not going to get it right 100% of the time. So I think you can find a little bit of everything if you're looking for it.
And I think, to answer it slightly different way, I think there has to be demand. And so to me, the high impact examples that I've looked at and something like this arena, which is trying to inspire many others to do the same thing, it's a way of helping build demand, so that people know what to ask for, what to look for, and care. It matters to them. And I think that that a lot of this is getting a little cerebral, but a lot of things in the climate field are talking about supply, are talking about, can we get more people to do X, and not about demand. The public has to really want this, and the public won't if they don't know. So my living wall slide is still up there and not the picture of the arena, but the living wall is an educational amenity that makes people say, oh yeah, and take pictures there, show it to other people, talk about it. It's part of the buzz. And I'm concerned about how we get change. And people, companies, vendors are not going to do things to the highest possible standards unless either they deeply, passionately care or they feel that their customers will care. And so how do you instill that in people? And that's why I believe that these great models can do that. And, I'm open to hearing more things that you consider really high impact. That is, they have multipliers, they do more than one thing, and we talked about fun already, and that they inspire and motivate people to want everything to that standard. Because if people don't know a different standard is possible, if it's invisible, they're not going to ask for it, and they're not necessarily going to pay for it.
True. And I guess, not to ask a downer question, but out of curiosity, I mean, where do you see, or where was in the Seattle case, where's the biggest vulnerability in this system? So, we hope that now this is the model, this is the template, and that, in women's sports that they look to this, but are also creating a brand new playbook. But there's a lot of hope, and there are a lot of things, as we see in climate quite often, that things that make perfect sense and should be done have points of vulnerability where there's someone or something or some administration or whatever it may be that might come in and change that. But where do you think what Seattle did had the biggest vulnerability points that they overcame somehow?
Well, I mean, so there were vulnerabilities all along the way. And speaking of women's sports or women, I didn't tell one of the stories about getting this in. So this all started in part because Seattle lost a basketball NBA franchise. And in fact, the winners of the NBA championship this year was the Oklahoma Thunders. That used to be the Seattle Supersonics. And The owner wanted a new facility because they were playing in something really old and wanted the city to pay for it. The city didn't want to pay for it. And so that started the whole thing. There were then some proposals to build something on the waterfront, which was already a congested neighborhood. There were some concerns about that. So the city council had to vote ultimately on a proposal. There were 9 members of the city council, 5 women and 4 men. The 5 women all voted against the waterfront proposal. The 4 men voted for it. That led to incredible misogyny. The women got attacked constantly. They were anti-sports. The Sonics fans were rabid. Now, Seattle, because of Climate Pledge, may get the Sonics franchise back. But there were a lot of politics involved. And until the city decided that they ought to send out bids on renovating the old arena in Seattle Center near the Space Needle. So the politics of getting things off the ground, then the vulnerabilities in the construction. There are things that could have failed at any point. The vulnerabilities in terms of stinting on one thing because nobody will notice. I mean, the public doesn't see whether the food that's being cooked for the special suites is being done on an electric range or a gas range. The public doesn't see it. And so there's that temptation. And so without a voice that's holding up the standard, and then a number of true believers who are measuring it all the time, it could easily fall apart. And then using local materials, using local food. There are a lot of challenges to go through that because there are concessionaires and vendors who would like to not have to live up to those standards. So it's vulnerable at nearly any point. So you need some true believers who have the clout to make it happen. You have to overcome the politics. You have to make a positive story, tell a story that the public believes is important about it, or it can fall apart. Now, one question is it enough, say, okay, we could do 80% of this and have a really great facility with winning teams? And by the way, I did find when I was studying losing and winning teams in confidence that the losing teams were often starved and were working in poor facilities. So, facilities do help you win to some extent. So, I don't know. And is it enough? Well, it might not be fast enough. We need to take action pretty quickly, I think, because the data out there tell us there's not as much time in the US as we think. But so you have to rally many stakeholders, all of whom see a vision, and you tell a story. So it's all leadership. I mean, I've said a lot of things, but it all comes down to leadership.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The only additional thing I would say is that when times are tough economically, it's harder for consumers if, to your point, like if products do cost more, because sometimes they do, that's a harder ask for a consumer. So that product better be worth it, or else the demand's not there. And I think the second thing is that some of these new business models or ideas or innovation takes time. And again, particularly when you have economic volatility or when things are tightening up, that's really when certain ideas either become cemented and they take off, or others get pushed away. And it's just a much more competitive environment. And so I do think with climate, at least my old job when I was at Google, I worked a lot on sustainability AI projects with companies. And oftentimes the ones that took off were the ones that you could immediately say, okay, let's produce an ROI around this. Let's have this self-funding. Let's make sure that whatever we're doing here is reportable, where you have leadership around it, but also that it's self-paying. And I think that helps in terms of making adoption easier, particularly in economically volatile times.
Maria, I have a question to you, Maria. Hello, I'm an ALR fellow. Thank you so much since you're here, Rosabeth. The question is about merchandise. You just mentioned that just the sustainability, it is very, very important issue. And a young population who just plan to go and watch all these matches, they already have high awareness. And they love sustainability, climate change, and they make a lot. But just imagine a young person who has just a limited budget and is just planning to go there and it just with a friend and he or she doesn't have purchasing power and it just finally had struggled to have this ticket and wants to buy this merchandise, but just there is no money in pocket. How do we convince this person who has high awareness but no money to buy this sustainable merchandise?
Do you have a perspective? Because it sounds like you. I have a couple of ideas, like in terms of accessibility of price points and this and that. But like, is there something inside?
I mean, they're already ready. They have awareness, and everything is ready there, but there is no money in the pocket.
I mean, I think the way at least that we're trying to think about it within my company is how do you give as much access as possible to individuals? And so one way you can get access is having different price points, so different products at price points. So a pair of socks will cost a lot different than a hat, which will cost a lot different than a hoodie, which will cost a lot different than a tee. And so when my designer and I are thinking about the products, we think about how many placements do we want? If you have less placements, it costs less, okay? We'd never sacrifice the quality of our fabric because that is who we are. But we think about how do we reach different people at different ranges. And so that might not be the best answer. And so maybe that individual wouldn't be able to purchase the Halo product at a very high price. But our hope is that our offering has enough of those smaller price points that you can engage. And then the other stuff I can't tell you because it's still a little bit secret. But anyway, we have some thoughts about how do you actually engage and involve individuals. And I think merch is absolutely one area. I think there's some other special sauce things that you can do as well.
Great way of thinking about it. One of my answers is trees. Trees are very important and undervalued sometimes, but trees are really important and anybody can get involved in planting trees and nurturing trees. And our greenest cities in America are very trees conscious. Cambridge, even more so than Boston, has a huge urban forest plan, but they've got lots of room for volunteers in neighborhoods that can water the trees. So we have to make sure that those things seem incredibly important. And so they're built in, say, to the new Washington Commanders stadium proposal. They're built into this arena. But there are things that are part of the world we live in that we don't value. The kids can get involved in. So this doesn't answer the question of how you're going to get the couple of $1 billion it's going to take to build something big, but it's a way to get involved and feel that you're making a difference. And it's hugely important because trees and painting roofs and other surfaces white. There are community projects that people can get involved in, and so they can feel very motivated. Whether they can afford the price tag, tickets to a lot of events at Climate Pledge Arena are premium priced. And so people consider it a special treat to do it. And they find a way that they can do it. And I'm not saying that's right. They do give away a lot of stuff. But it's a question of what people end up valuing. And I do think that we don't make enough of the kind of community amenities that everybody can participate in. And the other aspect of sports is not necessarily high-priced professional sports. It's the soccer games every weekend that kids play on green spaces in their communities. And We just have to make sure they exist. We have to make sure that there is our community swimming pools. Um, a chef to the Obama family drowned a few years ago. And he had just learned to swim the year before, and people said so it had nothing to do with him. I don't believe it. I think that kids from low-income families grow up with no access to a swimming pool. So I think of a lot of climate action has to take place city by city, community by community. And we have to think about the intersection of all these community issues. And I really think that's where we're going to make the most progress, is cities and civic pride.
And I think, just sorry, one thing you said, I answered on merch, but if you're going a little bit broader, if that individual bought a ticket and they're supporting a team that gives away proceeds to help community programs, they've already basically part of the team, part of the community. And so I think that by individuals supporting those teams that they feel take those actions, I think they're part of it already. They don't have to wear like a tee or a hoodie, and I'm sure there's something that can be done, but I think they're already part of it.
One more question or a couple more questions? We have some time. Go ahead.
Thanks for your presentation. So I have one question.
Sorry, could you speak up a little bit?
I know there are several business models recent year, just like except for the subscription or membership system, you can just pay for one class every time. So do you think, what do you think is the next trend of the gym or sports industry? For the just like new or innovative business model?
So you're asking about the subscription-based model for sports as having been a successful model, and what do we think the next trend will be? Anything? Merch.
And I think one thing that's super exciting, if you look at like AI, they're combining it with health. And I think that's a whole area where, if you're talking about like the sports industry more broadly, wellness, I think that's an area that's being disrupted right now. A lot of studies have only taken place in certain individuals. And I think you're seeing like IDA Sports, if you've never heard of them, they do soccer cleats. First time ever molded for the foot of a woman based upon like the body distribution that's different than men. I think that's a lot of innovation. I think that whole area, health, wellness, personalization of health, I think is one to watch for sure, because a lot of VCs are investing in those areas. In terms of, it's not really disruption, but I think in terms of media and in terms of platforms, I think there's going to be a massive consolidation in terms of streaming. And so I think that's an area to watch in terms of what actually is going to happen so that people can watch sports and participate on it across channels. Those are the two things I hear a lot of people talking about today.
Excellent. This will be the last question, sorry, and then I want to have a very quick, different closing question for each of you, but go ahead.
Okay, I guess I have to make it a good one.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much to both of you for your remarks. You've both touched on the importance of consumers demanding change, and especially taking problems that are invisible and making them more visible. I think the one that a lot of consumers are starting to pay attention to more is waste. We've started to learn more about the manufacturing of how clothing is made, but I think more people are learning about what happens to this product after it is purchased. There's actually a great documentary on Netflix, By Now, highly recommend. But was wondering if you could speak to just some ways in which there's more industry need for creating infrastructure to support things like textile to textile recycling, the importance of how can cost a premium to build some of that infrastructure, and then also helping consumers realize that their instant gratification can come with a cost. So, you know, when championship t-shirts are made, you don't know who's going to win. So both sets of t-shirts are made, which is
crazy.
right. And I just,
Crazy, but that's how it is.
I think a lot of people,
Yeah. So I'll tell you two things, then I'll switch over. So one is check out this company called RTV, Return to Vendor. Have you ever heard of it before?
RTV.
So cool, so cool. So RTV collects fishing nets, from across the world. They're nylon, melts them down, makes jerseys, shorts, et cetera. And so to your point about single use in terms of fabric and material, so again, going back to it makes a business case. Those companies that are innovating in terms of you make something, the championship doesn't win, you ground that back down, you make something else. And so that idea of circularity, there's been a huge amount of innovation in terms of the material side. You're right, recycling, scanning, sorting, processing, and setting up their recycling infrastructure. There's companies in Europe that have done it, cost a lot of money, varying degrees of success. I think it'll take time, investment, and sponsorship. I think the area, to your point, when you get to the crust of it, people need to care about not buying into this process. People need to buy maybe less, but buy higher quality. And so I think if you look at the whole spectrum, some of them have a high degree of technological innovation and investment, like recycling and textiles is going to take a long time, or material development, like RTV. There's others, if you could just convince people to care or make it easy for them to care, or like create cool stuff that lasts a long time and do a bit of education behind it. I think if companies work along that continuum without putting consumers down and just, saying we're trying to figure this out together, I think that's where you're going to see a lot of change. But yes, is it a problem? Oh, yes, it is a problem. But I think there's lots of solutions along that continuum.
And I think I'll just add that just if we're throwing names of companies out there, there's an HBS alum from a couple of years ago named Shelley Zhu, who runs a company called Shelley Zhu Design, or SXD. And I think you've met her. But she uses AI to create new cutout templates that use something like 50% or less fabric. So looking at how you can actually use technology to redesign the pre-cut so that you literally are cutting your fabric usage and scraps down by at least 50%, sometimes 80%. In many cases. So, I mean, there are a lot of innovations that are looking at the volumes, but also the reuse.
Or the not sexy stuff like AI to determine how much you should buy, where you put it, returns optimization. Like I did a lot of that in my old job using cloud technology, and that's really not sexy, but actually a lot of the goods that are returned get thrown away and get put in a landfill. And if you buy the wrong stuff to put in stores and make predictions, it's like the invisible problem that everyone knows about. Like if you could crack those two, that'd be pretty transformative. And I think with data, with AI, I think there are paths and solutions. There's lots of different providers.
So I think we'll take it from exactly that note. Professor Cantor, let's end on some inspiration, and then I'll turn to you, Maria. But where would you say, I mean, we have a room and a Zoom room full of people from very different backgrounds, many students, many mid-career, this whole range of things that one can do to improve and to innovate and disrupt within the sports industry for sustainability, for climate. If you were to say, go here, what would be a few of those things that you would say, this is where or if you're an investor or whatever, where's the go-to opportunity set?
Yeah, well, it's a very broad question. I mean, people are interested in many different things. But I would say if I had to boil it, it's like saying, by the way, there are 10 commandments, just give me the top 3. So if I had to say one thing, I would say ask questions, make information available. So maybe it's not 1, maybe I am to 3. So make information available, ask for the data. So in whatever you're doing, and then tell stories. I mean, I'm thinking I have to get, once this case is finally, ultimately released, I have to get it to Mayor Wu of Boston, because we're talking about building something here. So get the stories of positive actions, of possible actions out, and show that there's some interest and some demand. And that's in addition to whatever particular thing people choose to focus on. That's something we can all do as citizens. And assume that if we don't ask questions, ask for the data, so people have to measure things and tell the stories, it won't happen without that.
And Maria, you went through a journey in your life to decide to do what you're doing now. So how do you inspire others by, they're at some point in their journey? Yours is exciting.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how exciting it is, but I'm very excited. I think Lynn asked me to talk about like why I'm here today. And so my story is that I got very sick. And I might get a little emotional, just a disclaimer, and I'm totally okay. But I think when you have moments like that, it's like a sliding door moment. And you can go right or you could go left. And I think what I encourage all of you to do, and so basically I got very sick and I said to myself, actually, when I was like in the hospital, I said, actually, doing meaningful work is what I think of. Like, oh, I thought it was just family. No, actually, it's about meaningful work. And so I would encourage everyone, and I had a great job, like, doing well at Google, doing well at Gucci, all this stuff. My mom, I actually had, the day I got sick, there was an article about Vogue on me. And I was like, and I opened it up. I was like, means nothing, means nothing. And so I encourage all of you to hopefully never go through anything like that because it really, really sucked. But it did give me clarity and woke me up. So I would encourage all of you to think about, how do you want to live your life? 5, 10 years from now, what really matters? What gives you joy? And then you got to have an ounce of courage to do it. And so I quit my job at Google. Everyone thought I was absolutely freaking insane. They're like, what are you going to do? And I said to them, I'm going to lean into the unknown and I'm going to see. And so I explored women's sports, which I felt connected very deeply to what I wanted to do. And I was also exploring fashion, which was like my background. And I told Lynn I had a job, I had multiple, like other jobs like we all do, right? CEO of this fashion company, like, oh, wow, like would be great on my CV. Startup in Italy, fully funded, great on my CV, very risk-free. My husband's Italian, and like, it'd be easy to do that. And I was about to accept it, like, and it was in December, it was Christmas, I was in Italy, and I felt physically sick, like my body hurt, and I was like, what is going on? And I was like, I just can't do it. I just can't do it. And I talked to this guy who was like, oh, I have this crazy idea for this like women's sports thing. And he's like, Maria, damn it, like just do it. Like, what are you waiting for? So after I felt sick over Christmas, I came back in January of this past year, and I was like, I'm just gonna do it. And like, it was very, very scary. Like everyone talks about like, I think after you have success, they talk about, oh, it was so easy and I made the decision. I'll tell you the truth. It was like terrifying after making the decision to turn everything down and actually focus on something that mattered. But what I can tell you nearly a year later is it brings me joy. And I hope that all of you have a crazy, amazing career, because you can do anything for 2 years. But longer than that, let me tell you, it gets kind of tough. And while I hope you never, ever go through anything I do, what I hope my story maybe inspires or encourages, whatever, is take a moment to think about what really moves you. Because at the end of the day, like, it was family and it was meaningful work. And don't we all deserve that?
Yes. Holding back. But really, I mean, that's such a great way to end because, the context of this whole discussion was about an area for disruption and innovation. And it really comes from, Professor Cantor's passion to find the leadership examples and continuously tell these stories. And we're so grateful for that. And Maria's example of finding her own passion and really bringing together an incredible career to take a risk